So while the initiative has caught on and the intention is clearly good, a few artists in the industry have questioned it. Umo wrote, "I don't get the music industry blackout thing. What about a pledge to donate all the profits Tuesday?" And producer Jack Antonoff wrote, "What is the price of admission for a black square? Let's see some donations." It's an interesting point. An industry that makes so much money from black creators might want to think about its role in systemic injustice. We want to talk to someone about these ideas, someone smart, so we immediately thought of Dr. Tricia Rose, Brown University's professor of Africana Studies and director of the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America. She is the author of the seminal book, Black Noise, Rap Music and Black Culture in Contemporary America. Dr. Rose, nice to speak with you.
Nice to speak with you, too. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So what did you think about this initiative when you first heard about it?
Well, I think the first thing I thought was that it felt confused, right? I wasn't sure what was being paused and what was being opened up at the same time. So I think it did take off rather quickly, and that the women who thought of it probably didn't expect such a big response. And so there isn't really a complete developed plan in their defense.
Well, let's give some context to this. As we were discussing this in our editorial meeting, we were talking about how dependent the music industry historically has been on Black artists. And that dynamic between artist and label is something that should probably be explored. How would you describe it?
Oh, well, yeah, I think it needs to be explored. But, the primary word to describe that relationship is exploitation. And although many artists currently make a lot more money than they might have made in past generations when other genres were more, popular, it's always been a deeply exploitative relationship. And so that's number one. Number two, it's also been manipulative in terms of content. There's been a long history of industry labels and producers and other elements in the industry reducing the kind of political content and not releasing, not playing, radical political content. And so those kinds of contexts are really important. And, pausing the show for one day is not in any way going to change that kind of framework. It's going to take a much more significant level of self-interrogation and transformation. And you can't, rewrite the show, which is what really has to happen, unless you're looking at a much more serious long-term plan.
Music producer and songwriter Rafiel Sadiq, he posted on Instagram a couple of days ago, and the post said, "Streaming is the same as looting." Mm-hmm. That unless you buy my music from me, I'm not getting any money, bottom line. How important is the dominance of streaming to the history of exploitation in the music industry?
Yeah, really great question, Alison. I mean, there's each technological intervention has been both, in some senses, more democratizing and at the same time has reduced the power of musicians' ability to control their own artistic production and profit from that production. So, when records come out, a little over 100 years ago, you have a moment where artists can perform without being live, and this gives them audiences and potential revenue that they didn't have when there was no way to record their performances separate from them. But, with each new technology, streaming being the latest, you create contexts in which audience members may have more access to artists, but those who control the access to the streaming find ways to monetize it for the industry and to under-monetize it for the artists themselves. But even more important is the way in which the focus on money changes the content that the artists can legitimately expect to profit from by producing. So they change their content so that they can make whatever little bitty money they can make on streaming, right? Because the certain content may not be as popular. And this is where race becomes extremely important, not just Black music itself, but white perceptions of what constitutes Black music, white investments in certain kinds of Black performances, white refusal to support certain types of racialized images that wouldn't support their expectations. And that shapes the artistry as much as the technology.
So of these music industry executives who made this decision, they put the Black squares up, the intention is good. What is something they can actually do that would create change, that would create disruption?
Well, first of all, I think, and I'm speaking very generally here, I'm not speaking about any individuals, but your average, executive in corporate America is not well versed in the history of anything racial, and they're not spending much of their time doing it. So the first thing they need to do is really be serious about significant self-examination and, reading and researching, and they need to involve others in their social and workplace circles in that work. So this kind of, I'm going to pause and come up with a plan and have something by tomorrow, is a bit ridiculous. But for sure, they need to rethink how they relate to the tradition of Black music. Black music has been extremely important for the emotional sustenance, the spiritual sustenance, the political development, of the creative expression of a profoundly disregarded people. So they have a legacy that they are, unfortunately, extremely powerful in determining its future. So the first thing is to understand they have a moral and ethical responsibility to the tradition, not just to the latest artists, not just to the most popular, the most profitable ones. And so they should be deeply invested in a serious, expansive music education program, and that Black music should be at the heart of the curriculum in public schools around the country. And that would be an incredible way to show young people the tradition that they have been a part of, that's been largely obscured by the industry because those genres are not selling enough, so they don't pay attention to them, right? So part of this is by changing the market logic and saying there's an ethical, moral responsibility to pay attention to this profound tradition, then they're actually inverting the industry's power. The second thing is, to fund music curriculums in particular. So one is to help support it, but to fund it even outside of schools and see themselves really as music educators themselves. But finally, the thing that I really wish they would do is let Black musicians own their own catalogs and acknowledge that the contracts most artists have with record labels are ridiculous. The few that I've seen, and it's been just a few, but they are, they're extremely exploitative, extremely long and one-dimensional. And if someone breaks big, they find themselves, constrained. So this is, why Prince made the number of the choices that he made, for example. Mm-hmm. And, they don't like to talk about this. It's a deeply exploitative relationship. And so this whole solidarity and pause the show and have a black box, it's a little embarrassing, if you feel a sense of a relationship to them, but it's more infuriating if you see them in the historical terms that they are truly a part of.
Dr. Tricia Rose is Brown University Professor of Africana Studies and Director of the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America. Dr. Rose, thanks for making time today.
My pleasure. Have a good day.